White Lotus Season 2 Episode 3 Ending Explained. Following on from the end of Episode 2 with Dominic spending the night with Mia and Lucia, Episode 3 of the show picked up directly after the night before on day 3 of the trip in Sicily. With Harper and Daphne going off and spending the night in Noto, Cameron and Ethan partying the night away, Gregg leaving Tanya, and Portia wanting a little more from Albie, there's a lot to unpack from this episode. So let's get into it. Here is White Lotus Season 2 Episode 3 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Episode 3, titled Bull Elephant, was named after the sentence that was spoken around 3/4 of the way through the episode between Daphne and Harper. This was where Daphne mentioned how she imagined that it would be relatively lonely being a man, like a bull elephant, out there to fend for itself. This episode didn't draw us any closer to finding out who was in the sea on the beach in episode 1, or even who the killer was, but there were some extremely interesting moments that could allow some ideas to be questioned. For example, as the episode went on, we saw the head that was positioned all around the hotel, which was discussed in episode 1 a total of 4 times in this episode, and a selection of shots from the rough sea off of the beach several times as well. But this was only ever shown after a shot of Ethan. Did Ethan cheat? Or did the fact that he said no after kissing her change things? I imagine it's subjective in the eyes of many couples, and maybe even between Ethan and Harper too. Could we potentially see the origin story of the head mirrored in Ethan and Harper's relationship on this trip? Maybe, as there are already signs of 2 people being on different pages. It's just an idea, but the subtlety of the selected shots felt deliberate. I'll break this video down by the character arcs. Harper and Daphne. At the start of the episode, we saw that Harper wanted to make an effort with Ethan, but we saw that he wasn't really interested, a common reaction from him in this show. The conversation of what they both get up to intimately has been something that's had a focus throughout the season so far, and it seems as though Ethan is most certainly not really interested in spending time with her in bed, which I do find quite interesting as to why that could be. But judging by what he said to Cameron, it's just the nature of a long-lasting relationship, in his eyes anyway. Harper and Daphne went on a trip to a town called Noto together, where we saw the pair of them receiving a lot of unwanted male attention, which I think was constructed for the purpose of the viewers to allow us to all see what it can be like to experience this type of unwanted attention in mass numbers, and it certainly painted the picture. We made some revelations about Cameron and Daphne's relationship, which I thought was interesting, and it was about how she didn't mind that Cameron cheats on her, as she does what she wants. But you could see that deep down, despite the fact that she didn't view herself as a victim, it was never a life that she painted for herself. The purpose of this conversation though was for us to see how finding out about what Cameron was like behind closed doors would affect Harper's mind, and you could instantly see the level of paranoia growing within her mind as she wondered if Ethan would be cheating on her that night, even down to the phone call that we all saw at the end. The fact he didn't answer is going to be something that I think we will see develop on in the next episode, as I imagine the level of trust is going to start to drop between the pair, leading another crack to develop. Cameron and Ethan. Whilst Harper and Daphne were off in Noto, we saw Cameron and Ethan spend the day together. We saw more of a side to Cameron than we did Ethan, in the sense that we learned that Cameron was prepared to make money in a way that wasn't strictly above board. He cheats on his wife and he has no problem in doing so. It almost seemed as though he brought Ethan on the trip so he could strike up the prospect of doing business with him when they're back in the UK. With regards to Ethan, on the other hand, it felt as though he didn't really have a voice. He just went along with it, other than when Mia kissed him and he said no. Ethan is a really interesting character for these reasons. We've not seen him express much of an opinion or provide many decisions on the entirety of the trip, so it does make me wonder about his character. He loves his wife, and despite selling his company and making money, he views himself as being relatively ordinary, which is the complete opposite to Cameron. I think Harper and Ethan's stories will be extremely intertwined next week, as their relationship will hit the rocks over Ethan most likely not being honest about kissing Mia, and Harper growing suspicious about what actually occurred, along with why he didn't answer his phone and how the evening finished off. I think Ethan has a wider role to play in the series. As I mentioned, the focus on the sea being on screen after there's a shot of him, along with his interest in the heads in episode 1, there's a strong connection to cheating and death in those 2 symbolic features. Dominic and Bert. that both of these two characters didn't really have that large of an involvement in this episode in terms of developing the narrative. We saw Dominic cut ties with Lucia because he wanted to repair the relationship with his wife. We saw him turn to his son Albie because he valued his opinion and knew that his mother listened to him. But I also felt that this was just a way of using his position as a father to try and get his son to speak well of him. The temptation to approach a woman at the end of the episode was something that was made a key focus of, but he decided to turn away and do the right thing and change, as Albie mentioned earlier on. Portia and Albie. Portia and Albie is an arc that I'm probably the least interested in out of them all. Again, they didn't get much screen time in this episode, but it was more focused around Portia not getting excited by the way that Albie is. Albie's becoming more aggressive and firm, which isn't part of his natural behavior, and I think it speaks more about trying to change somebody that you're with, rather than seeking out somebody who's naturally like that. Portia clearly isn't interested in him, as her eye is wandering after a day, so I feel Albie is most likely going to get his heart broken. Tanya and Gregg. Gregg left Tanya in the hotel for 2 days and was planning on coming back after what he described as work. Whereas we know that it's not, based on the phone call that he had at the end of episode 2 in secret, where he informed the person that he loved them. This led Tanya to get a tarot card reader, and she informed her of her fears, where she basically implied that Gregg was cheating. Her upset from the reading was something that carried through right up until the end of the episode, where she was being smiled at by other men, but she chose to ignore them. Tanya is a character that relies on somebody else to be happy, whether that be her husband or her assistant, Portia. She doesn't like being on her own, and it's a key feature for the character. Will she cheat on Gregg? I don't think she's looking for that, but that's something I think we'll find out in the next episode. But it would be the last night to do so before he arrives back the next day. Love, lust, intimate behaviors, and the value of a relationship are all key focuses at this point in the show, even down to how Lucia is rubbing off on Mia, and the way that she now is starting to behave. Isabella and Valentina look as though they're set to strike up some kind of romance, and the incorporation of this could tie into why Valentina was so abrupt with the man in the coffee shop. One, because you would imagine she gets that on a regular basis as she stated, but it could also be because she's suppressing her sexuality. I would say that this episode was the most eventful of the season so far, and I feel we're most certainly going to see the repercussions of what happened between Cameron, Ethan, Lucia and Mia in episode 4. Which I think is going to be exciting and interesting to see on screen. So, there you have it. White Lotus Season 2 Episode 3 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos such as Endings Explained, theories and predictions and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of episode 3? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.